Okay.
Many of us have found ourselves in an unusual predicament, not only physically, but financially, physically, and emotional. And sometimes our spirituality is in trouble. I would like for you to understand that where you plant your tree or your life, if you plant it in rich soil, you've done it because someone told you some things. So that means wisdom, that means understanding, that means principles, precepts, and above all, it means discipline. And from that, you're going to acquire financial freedom, physical freedom, emotional freedom, and above all, spiritual freedom. Now, on the other side of the coin, where we spend so much of our time, just simply because we are ill, is putting our roots to our system in poor soil. And that shows a lack of wisdom, a lack of understanding, poor follow-through, poor principles, no precepts, no instructions, and no discipline. That's what we want to do, is see if we could do something a little bit different, in that perhaps maybe where we come from has had an effect on what we're doing. In Scripture, in Isaiah 46, it talks about declaring out of the beginning the end. That pretty much tells us that wherever you're starting your process from is going to determine the end. So man's plan is a very unusual thing. And we need to understand that it is our languages that carry our thoughts. So cultures and thought processes are stored in language. Our language, the English language, is derived from Latin and Greek. And in that, they are very, very abstract, and they're very linear, meaning they move horizontally. Therefore, they are subject to change. And I think as we understand our children, from the baby boomers, their language changed from the people who went from them, my language, my arena. And then you get into the millennials. So words have a tendency of changing, and we lose the meaning. I'd like to suggest that they create their own language. I watch these kids today. They have computers, and they create their own language on the internet. They create their own religious system. They create their own diet. They create, candidly, their own doctrines. So it's what we're passing on, is it seems to lose its value. And I think today in our cultures, we're living in a very, very questionable value system because our morals have changed so much. Let me move you over into the Hebrew language. It's a very concrete language that's cyclical. In other words, the seeds beget the fruit begets the seeds, and we start that cycle. And so from one group of people to their offspring, we're moving the very same message. So we have like kind produces like kind. The seed is in the fruit, and the commandments are in the seeds. So if we understand that, let's start talking about the positive side of what it's like to feel good. We need to understand this thing called energy, because it's with energy that we begin to develop our health. No energy, you're just dead in the water. And if we go about building energy from stimulants, I will guarantee you that it's short-lived, and the end result of that is a host of diseases. So when you implement sugars and caffeines, then what you're asking for and making an environment for is disease to live in. On the other side of the coin, if we structured our food intake to build ATP, which is one of the most incredibly elegantly designed features of the human body. It is the wonder molecule of our system. In fact, when we create ATP, the numbers are kind of interesting. A 2,500 calorie diet will create 400 pounds of ATP in a day. That is the most phenomenal engine the world has ever seen. So out of a maximum of only having 50 grams of protein, of ATP in the body at one time, that is cycled so quickly that we get a continuum of fuel, the most efficient engine the world has ever seen. And it's got interesting concepts in terms of how it's structured. It really is a molecular engine. It's got a rotor to it, it's got a stator, and it's got a drive shaft, all coming together at one time. So in essence, we are talking about an intelligently designed element that builds energy for you in every cell. Every living element has ATP. Those are the things that we want you to understand. If you bypass that, you have created a horror story for yourself physically. Well, how did all this change? Let us go back to the 19th century when we began to bring in highly processed sugar, or refined sugar, if you will. At that time, we were consuming 5 pounds a year per individual of refined sugar. That is increased now to 5 pounds a week. So we're deriving our energy from something that is synthetic and is a chemical. So if we're going to make some changes, you need to understand that not only are you fighting for energy, but you're fighting a world of chemistry. In that, sugar metabolizes to an opiate-like substance. So back in that early time frame, when we begin to change the language, the first thing that the argument took place in the mid-30s is with processed foods, they wanted to call it imitation foods. Those people of my ilk, the naturopaths of the time, because they knew it wasn't real. Now, they didn't have the science that we have to support what I'm about to tell you, but they had something that was concrete, that they knew that something that was not real couldn't function as well as something that's real. Well, the argument cascaded until the 73 time frame. And then they agreed to convert the word real food to nutrients. And in that process, as you read your packaging, it says here's the nutrient content. It's actually inorganic salts and synthetic vitamins, but they've all agreed to say that that is a nutrient. So the question that you have to answer in your own life is something that's not real, bound to something that's dead, meaning a mineral. How can you create life from that? And let me suggest to you that as you go to the grocery store with the intentions of buying foods that produce energy, have the nutrients in them that's going to do the job that you want, I would think it fair that the vast majority of us recognize that it's not there. So as we shop for that, and then we go over to the vitamin store, the vitamin part, and we buy our vitamins and we buy our minerals, hopefully to buy and build energy. The only problem with that is the vast majority of those nutrients, if you will, are made from synthetics and inorganic salts. So from there, because we don't get the energy that we need, we wind up finding ourselves in a coffee store, buying caffeine and sugared, stimulated foods so that we can get through the day. And therein lies the big problem. We are looking for monies or ways to make an income, make things happen financially so that we can afford what we're doing. Would you find it interesting to know that out of a Stanford study, that the average person today consumes 222 pounds of red meat? That is an enormous amount of meat. It would make sense that if we could cut that in half, there would be an incredible savings there. Along with that, the average consumed amount of soft drinks is 50 gallons per year per person. Think about what we're putting in our body. So if we could just gather all that together and look for dense nutrients, we could probably save ourselves an enormous amount of money. Well, life's funnel has an interesting connotation. Out of 1,000 people going into this life that we work through, at the age of 60, one of them pops out free of pharmaceuticals. We need to look at that and say something is definitely wrong with that. Along with the obesity issues, the cardiovascular issues, the demented issues, all of these things diabetes. All of them are because of something that we're eating. Now, I know of no physician and I know of no patient when they just get after their heart attack that the doctor doesn't change their diet. So my suggestion to you is knowing what's going on up front is going to put you in a position of having a heart attack. Maybe we ought to change our diet up front. And that's what we'd like to do. There is a significant difference between something that is alive and something that is dead. I've taken the time to do some sprouting, and I've used processed wheat, I've used rocks, I've put in a host of plants that sprout, and you can see from the photos that life will actually sprout, and it becomes very, very, very dense food. Now, why would a person put polished rice or polished wheat or polished barley, or in this case, cereals that have been processed? Why would you put them in your body if there's no life in them? So that's what we're looking at. And these highly processed foods often can contain preservatives, they contain flavors, they contain colorants. All of these things are just not good for you. Along with that, they've so processed genetically that the ingredients now are not only, they alter the brain, according to some studies, but they create an environment where you can't quite quit eating. So you find yourself continually nibbling on some of these foods. Well, the outcome of that has got to be obesity. And here we sit in a nation where 70% of Americans are highly overweight. Along with that, we're dealing with a serious problem with the liver, in that the liver is known as what's non-alcoholic fatty liver damage. And this is, we're finding in the vast majority of our teenage boys that 48 to 50% of them have that disease. Now, they can have that disease and continue on, and the liver will function until about 80% of it does not function. And then you begin to feel the really serious effects. Those that are sensitive feel it much earlier. I'm going to suggest that if we're going to cure this, why don't we begin to put things that are alive into our body? And one of the most interesting sciences that we have is the fact that something that's alive has information in it. It has DNA. It has a host of abilities of reading the DNA, and it directs itself to its own needs in the cell. And it stores it, it retrieves it, and it has its own interpreting instructions. Much like any computer that we have today, it has those capabilities. So if we were going to solve this problem, where would we go? Well, I think the first area that we have to look into is cleaning the blood. The blood circulates 3.5 times a minute. And if we could filter that blood so it's clean, then we need to filter the liver. And we found an incredible product in red beets. Now, I know everybody loves red beets. I do, for sure. I have a doctor friend of mine that told me that I found the only 5 people in the world that liked red beets. Well, that's just not true. Within that capability of cleaning the liver, we find a host of other things, such as a production of nitric oxide. Well, nitric oxide is considered one of the miracle finds of our century, in that it creates a vasodilation of the arteries. Those people dealing with high blood pressure will suddenly, perhaps, feel relief because the continued pulsating action of the arteries. Well, it happens to happen in every cell in your body. So you get the vasodilation. It's rich in antioxidants. It's got quercetin, which is an incredibly anti-inflammatory element. Whoa. If we think about that for just a second, where there is inflammation, there is disease. So you have a host of things. All of the trace, all of the minerals and the vitamins are organically derived. So you're getting things in real, live action. So we threw in sweet potatoes. An interesting find, because the vast majority of Americans are dealing with a weight issue. Well, instead of doing it via calories in, calories out, what would happen if we addressed the hormonal side of things? Lo and behold, there are elements in sweet potatoes that control the adiponectin and the ghrelin and the leptin, which is the fat-burning hormone that's made in fat. So if we can eat less and convince the body that you're being fed correctly, control hormones, it would make sense that the possibility of creating more energy from fat than you do from protein would be there. Along with that, we've added hemp hearts. Now, I personally have been using hemp hearts for 15 years. They're loaded with linoleic and linoleic acids, the omega-3 and the omega-6 oils. They've got rich protein. They're gluten-free. So we have a fabulous source of raw protein. And then the greatest find I think that we have that really puts this thing together is goat whey. Goat in its product, in its biochemistry, produces glutathione. Glutathione is one of those incredibly important elements. It is one of the most important antioxidants that the body builds. So if you can have it to where it's built naturally via the body itself, in that biochemistry, rather than isolates put in your system, obviously we're going to have a real winner. Along with that, the fat molecules are very small, and fat produces the most ATP between protein and carbohydrates and fats. It is the most incredible. Along with that, we've got biometrics, probiotics. Can you cut that out?
Well, I'm going to have to now. We're good.
Okay, we have probiotics. We have electrolytes. All of these things to make your body work better. That's the product that most people will use. Well, this is a supplement. This is just to get you started. That was us looking at the needs of the community and what they were not getting. They were not getting these elements, so we thought we would package them together. But think about a breakfast made from raw nuts, other grains, things that are in whole form. So by the time you get through with this thing, you've got ample protein for the whole of the body, you've got all of the fats that you need, and you've got something that's a minor cost to you in terms of product. Think about that. Look us up. I think you'll find our product very, very interesting. What do you think?
Good, yes. Besides that one little, I can cut that. That's not a problem. I was messing with you.
I know you were. What do you think?
I really liked it.
Now, Rich.
No,
I really
I'm
stumbled.
not just saying that. I am not. I think it was,